Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX. Today, I am really excited to welcome back friend of the show and social media voice of reason in South Africa, Darren Kamfer. Darren, thank you so much for joining us back on SMWX.
Thanks for having me once again.
I don't know how to even...
There's something different about this particular interview.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you want to just... Let's just break
Let's
this
just
right
get into
now.
it.
Yeah.
What do you want to know? Go for it. Shoot.
You're wearing an MK hoodie.
I am indeed.
Can you explain to us why you're wearing an MK hoodie?
Yes. So MK is a political party that is registered in...
You're not helping me beat the charges of this being an MK podcast.
You know, what's funny is that, like we said before we started, we had scheduled this meeting early October.
Yeah.
We'd scheduled to come back to sit end of November.
Yeah.
And I officially started with MK on the 22nd of October.
Wow.
So 3 weeks after we had already scheduled this.
Wow.
Then turns out.
Yeah. So let's get into it. You've decided to join MK Party. Talk us through that decision.
Yeah. So I joined MK Party as head of research, so heading up the research team.
Wow.
Firstly, really cool team. People in the team are some of the most brilliant people I've ever met, and I'm really fortunate to be working with them. If they are watching, big fans. So, firstly, I had been approached by several people in MK since before elections.
Right.
At the time, I had a lot of questions about the party. I didn't yet get the answers or the clarity that I was hoping for.
Yeah.
I was okay with the manifesto, but it didn't have enough on the social side of things to make me comfortable. So at that point, I said, there's not enough for me with the platform that I have to justify making the step with the values and what I advocate for in this particular way. I was like, once those kind of things are fleshed out, I understand it's a very new party. I'm not like, the growing pains of a new party. I understand. So
Sure.
as those things go on, but I'm going to need answers to those questions. So that was pre-elections. Post-elections, I was then contacted and somebody asked me, like, how do you feel about being in the research department or contributing on that side? I know it's a lot of what you do. We also need somebody to assist in breaking information down to an easy to digest level, not just for the MPs, but in terms of party policy as a whole, just to kind of clarify on things. At that point, I started asking more questions. Now things were a bit more flushed out. I was able to understand what the party's policy was. The party was also a lot more articulate in terms of what they wanted and what they wanted to do and what the anti-imperialist, anti-colonial, anti-racist agenda was of the party. And I was like, I can get behind this. I think what eventually sealed the deal for me was the Constitution. The Constitution made very clear statements on equality for everybody, including all kinds of minorities in terms of gender, all those kind of things. I was like, okay, this I can work with. Then the conversation started to go further.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is big. This is crazy because this just like confounds people's stereotypes about what the MK is. I mean, you're an important voice in South African politics and you've established yourself as such. And from a personal perspective, like, what does it mean for you to go into the formal political space? Because I know we've had conversations about this before. How did you come to that personal decision as well?
So just before we jump to that, I actually do want to say the one thing that I know I say the Constitution sealed the deal for me, but I don't think that is what sealed the deal. I think what did seal the deal for me is one of my first meetings with some of the leadership of the party. I went in.
Okay.
Like I asked uncomfortable, I asked tough questions. I said, these are my values. What is going on there? And where there wasn't a sufficient answer for me, I was told, advocate for that policy in the party. They said, you're going to be in the research department, bring us justification for what you are saying, bring us information on how this is relevant, explain your position, advocate for that in the party in its formative stages. You are free to do that in the party. And that I found was refreshing for me. I had not experienced that from many political parties that I engage with. And quite a few have reached out. I'll refrain from saying their names, but more than a handful. And I've asked them very difficult questions, and very few of them have actually said, fight us on it. And we'll change it. And we'll look at how we can do things differently. We are unopposed to that. And I was like, okay. And I wasn't like the most friendly person asking questions, because I was like, listen, these are things that are important to me, and if we don't agree on these values, we just can't. We're not going to be able to move forward.
It's an important point, because MK is so new, but people assume that it is set in stone, and it's in a very formative stage of its life. It can go in multiple directions, and I guess the next year will be really important in actually setting the trajectory of the party in one of those different directions.
Yeah. So for me personally, the decision, I've always been on the fence about whether to stay neutral or to get involved in the work of politics. I was good either way. I was good to stay where I was and stay neutral. I had managed to kind of lock myself into a position where I could say what I wanted to say, and nobody was going to kind of try and direct my speech. But I was also open to being involved in the work of politics and getting a more intricate understanding of it, and being involved in how policies are framed and structured. And that last part was important to me. That was one of the things I'd said in the meeting with leadership. I was like, I want to be involved in shaping policy and articulating that policy in the public, because for me, my personal agenda, if you want to call it that, is to make sure that we have an electorate that falls in love with policy and falls in love with ideology, more importantly. I don't think we're yet at the stage in society where we fall in love with an ideology. We kind of idolize the person who embodies that ideology, and we see that person as like the be all and end all of that ideology, and it's not. And so what I would like to be involved in on a personal level, and what is always going to be what I'm trying to do in whatever role I'm working, is to try and get the electorate, try and get the South African public to look at ideology and say, that's the ideology I want for myself and I want for society. And the person who embodies that and carries that will be a secondary decision, not the primary one, which it is now. We look at a leader as this X, Y, and that kind of leader, and all they are is really carrying a particular ideology and enforcing that through policy. And we need to move past that very fast.
Are you concerned that being in formal politics may constrain your voice? Or do you feel like you'll be able to strike the right balance between, being an outspoken person, but also contributing to a party which has its own rules and structures? In meeting with the leadership, I made the leadership aware of what they were getting when they got me. I said, my words to them verbatim was, if we can agree ideologically, we won't have any issues. Once we start to differ there and policy doesn't reflect the ideology that I advocate for and the ones that you have advocated for that has brought me here, then you'll probably give me the boot at some point. Because I can't do that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So let's come to some of the questions about MK that are, out there. I think that the one, and I recall when we spoke last on the podcast, you were also still thinking about MK, you were thinking about the EFF, and we'll come on to the EFF as well, because wow. So I think you mentioned that, you weren't sure, there was this talk of the Robben Island thing, which to be honest isn't an MK policy. It was something that former President Zuma said, and it got a lot of media traction, but I don't see it anywhere in the Constitution. The rights of queer people and whether MK was, on the right side of that. Are you confident that the MK is not a regressive social party? Because that's the critique that's been launched against it, that it may be economically progressive, but it may be socially conservative.
Right. Yeah. And that has always been my concern.
Yeah.
I don't know why some of those statements were made. I can't speak for what the idea was behind those statements. But I've not seen that reflected in the Constitution. I've not seen that reflected in the policies they advocate for. I've not seen that reflected in how the MPs ask questions or comment on things in their portfolio committees. I don't know what to tell you, to be quite honest with you. Like, I can't bullshit you and be like, oh, this is why. I don't know. But what I can say is that being in the party for the brief amount of time that I have been, but engaging with him for several months, it's not been there.
This is a smart move for MK as well. I'm not going to lie. It's just like, my mind continues to be blown by this decision. Like I say, I heard about it before when we spoke, and I was just like, no way, because it just completely changes like the way that like various different parts of the electorate will look at MK. Wow, MK's TikTok game is going to be on. Are you going to be able to advise them on like they're doing pretty well on digital media?
I'm involved on I'm really in the background,
right?
When it comes to MK. My first priority as head of research is to make sure and to work with the team and make sure that the MPs are really on top of their game when they sit in those portfolio committees. So right now in the early stages, a lot of the work I'm doing is around building structure so that I can get information from them and give information to them. Like I said, I have very, very talented researchers with me who are, I can't brag about them enough. But anyway, so that will be my first priority. I might, if they want me to, I might get involved on the comm side a bit later. Right. But for now, my priority is to really break things down and make it simple. And then the secondary priority for me as head of research in the party is to inform the public through publications on what exactly our stance is on policy, where we do you know what I mean? So when we pass information on to an MP in the portfolio committee and he's speaking on responding to the medium-term budget policy statements and that kind of stuff, one of the things that I'd mentioned in the meetings with the leadership is I would like to make some of that information available to the public so that they can see what we're talking about in Parliament, so that they can understand, because I feel there's a disconnect between the public and the work that the MPs do on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
So I was like, allow me to not just be involved with shaping and creating that information, but allow me to assist in passing that information on to the public, so that they know where their votes have gone. They know what their MPs are doing on a regular basis, and they know the kind of arguments that they are creating there as well. So that disconnect kind of closes a bit.
Tell us about the team, which you seem to be excited, and this research team which you're building around the MK party and what you hope to achieve with it.
I really hope to build an extremely proactive team. I would like for us as a team to get to the point where we cannot just, because right now, and not just in this party, but in many political parties, the work of the research department is often reactive. MPs will need information, they'll reach out to the research team and they'll get it back to them. And because MPs are sitting in very long meetings, they're always very busy. And so it's, the quality of the information is sometimes compromised. So I'd like to, one of the first things I'd like to do is be proactive, and to let MPs know what the pulse of the public is as far as possible, and to address that in Parliament accordingly. Because at the end of the day, MPs are public representatives of the electorate who voted for them. MPs need to speak from an understanding and a position of what the public experiences. So what I hope for the research team to be, and what I'm working for the research team to be, is to say, this is what the public is feeling, this is what they're experiencing, this is what it translates to in the work that you do on a regular basis. Can you please push for this? Because this is what the public wants from you. And the team is extremely passionate in every cluster that they sit in, and in every sector of the economy that they look at. They are very passionate about it, and that's most of my job is easy because of that, because they are very passionate about it. They're not these kind of researchers who's like, oh, I need to do some reading. Like they get into it and they bite and they won't let go. They're like, no, I want to know more about this. Like I have to sometimes tell them, like, go sleep, please. Like it's fine. Go sleep. We'll get to this tomorrow. I got you. I understand what you're trying to say. Let's dig into this tomorrow. So I'm very fortunate in that regard.
It's also a big opportunity because, like in the space of outside party politics, one of the things that I struggle with is like, you can talk, you can advocate, but then you never actually get to do. Like you never get to form the policy position that changes policy. Right. Or shape the country in a different direction. You can shape people's minds, but then there's always a layer of action. You actually head of research for the official opposition of South Africa.
Yeah, I did take a little bit of time to internalize that. I've also got a lot of support in the party. We've got a lot of support from some very seasoned, very experienced people in the party. So I don't work alone in terms of taking on the task that I've been given. So far, so good.
Floyd Shivambu has been appointed as the Secretary General of the party. Of course, he's made headlines just week on week with his move to the MK party. What do you think this means for the party, and what's the thinking behind Shivambu's move to this central position?
With regards to his move, you're going to have to speak straight to the leadership of the party on that. But what I can say is he's been pivotal in creating a lot of structure, because I work actively on the parliamentary side of things, and he's kind of worked a lot in both sides and on the campaigning side, and working with the electorate and national provincial organizers. So I believe he's created a lot of structure and a lot of streamlining of operations, as you need to with a new party. You know what I mean? It's the same thing I'm facing on the research side of things is, the foundation has to be laid. And how information needs to flow needs to be laid. And I believe he's been doing an exceptional job in that regard. So it makes sense that they would put him as Secretary General, just because he's been involved in like that on the ground from scratch. Creating that structure and that flow for everybody. So I get it.
And so in your role linked more to Parliament, are you reporting into Dr. Hlophe? Or is it more towards the party and the SG, or do you have like a more autonomous role? What's the structure of how you're gonna
so I report I report mostly into the Chief of Staff, because ultimately she's accountable for MPs making sure they have proper support.
Interesting.
But then I work with head of media and comms as well. I also work with some of the whips and making sure that they get the information, because that's ultimately who I want to keep happy at the end of the day. Make sure that they are I want to make sure they're well armed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So between Chief of Staff and the MPs and the cluster whips, that's where I sit and jump back and forth most of the time.
Are you able to divulge like which leaders of the MK were able to make you, because they need to be given some kind of award, because this is I have my suspicions. Can I share?
I will say this. It was a long process. I had to meet with quite a few people.
Interesting.
It wasn't just like it was quite a process. Between the people who reached out to me and wanted me to get on board, and then the meetings in leadership that I had to have to finally hand it down, we're talking like easily like 6 people just to like make it happen. So there's quite a process.
Wow.
There's quite a process. They didn't just like, TikToker, come here. They were like, no. There was at one stage I even had to do a presentation on exactly what the idea was for the research department. Like explain to us in a pitch, in documentation, in submissions, what your idea is for this department. So I don't want to have them like get hounded by like, okay, I also want to, it can get crazy.
It can.
But it was, I don't want to use the term grueling, but they put me through my paces before they were like, okay, cool. Be happy.
Sam, I just wanted to interrupt this episode to let you know the 4 ways you can help SMWX. Way number 1, you can invite me to speak at your institution or company. Way number 2, you can advertise on this channel. Way number 3, you can become a member of this channel. The link to the membership is down below. And number 4, you can buy merch, that's books or hoodies. Now let's get back to the episode. All our contact details are in the description box below. The EFF. It's an interesting and a difficult time for them. no doubt they're gonna come after you now as they're coming after many different people. But at the same time, although I feel like in some ways some people within the EFF are playing this wrong because they are in some ways focusing more attention on attacking MK than the actual governing coalition. There also has to be a conversation at some point about, like, in some ways there's an obvious move here, which is that those who are ideologically, firstly outside government in the first place, but also outside the ideology of this government, have it in their interest to come together.
Right.
And yet there's so much personal bad blood that's forming that it feels like the interpersonal politics are pushing the two parties apart. What are your thoughts on where these two important parties find themselves and this kind of moment of this moment of conflict between them?
So I think the one thing that's undeniable is that EFF and MK have more to gain being on the same side than being enemies. I don't think anybody will dispute that point.
Sure.
I understand the feelings around the animosity around some of the leadership leaving. People are going to do what they're going to do. Individuals are going to make the moves that they feel is either best for them or best for what their personal ethos is or what their personal beliefs for themselves are. I mean, lots of people might watch this and feel like I'm stepping away from my personal ideology and beliefs. And in reality, for me, I'm not. I've found enough, and I found enough in the party ideologically for me to justify the move that I'm making. So if these individuals, for whatever reason, are going to move from EFF to the MK, I don't think we can really tell autonomous, grown adult human beings what to do. I can't speak to every individual's motives. I can't read their minds. But what I do want to say, and what we have to remember, and we often forget this in the detail of politics, reaching critical mass to achieve things like expropriation without compensation, nationalization, free education, universal healthcare, etc. We don't have the luxury of breaking ourselves apart into pieces and hoping we're still going to achieve those. So if we want to have the little back and forth on politics and who's leaving and who's gone, by all means, go wild. As long as we understand that inside the walls of Parliament and inside the fight for an ideology that we're trying to implement, we have to reach that critical mass. It's not optional. It's one of the same things I say about Pan-Africanism. Like, if we want to free any part of the continent from imperial rule, we have to consolidate as a continent. The same thing has to happen for parties within the country. If we don't consolidate our moves strategically, as much as we have issues with each other, those things aren't going to be tabled. It's not going to be on the agenda, and ultimately it won't happen. And so I'm less concerned. The media is going to do what they're going to do. Mainstream media is going to be like, EFF and MK, whatever. You know what I mean? I'm less bothered about that than I am about whether we are going to collectively advocate for those ideologies, like nationalization, like land expropriation without compensation. Are we on the same page there? If we're on the same page there, tweet about each other. I really can't be bothered. You know what I mean? But if we can still agree that we are going to advocate for that together, then we can let the media go on a rampage. They can say whatever they want to say, and the media can cry when we nationalize state resources and we expropriate land without compensation, and then they can say whatever they want to do. It's more about us forming that critical mass to achieve the things that we want to achieve, that we have both as a party written down on paper several times and spoken on several times, and achieving that, then whether we're upset about one move from one party to the next. That's going to happen indefinitely in politics all the time. And that's, again, this comes back to why I want to be actively involved in getting the public to fall in love with ideology. Because then we can float between different leftist socialist parties, as long as those leftist socialist parties want to do the same things. Can't be bothered.
And we've seen in Botswana, even though that coalition is not necessarily on the left, that, and in many different African states, consolidating different opposition parties around one common agenda is often how you end up dislodging the existing incumbent. In your view, like the way I'm reading things right now, and I could be wrong, a lot of what MK is speaking about, if you cut through the noise and the personal politics and all of that, is we need to see unity. We need to bring these different forces together because we're stronger as a united force than these differentiated parties. The EFF, though, doesn't seem to be buying into this idea yet, but they may well buy into it in the future. Do you see, like, going into the 2026 election that there may be, or maybe 2029, if not 2026, some kind of united front, either under the same banner or parties actively coordinating together rather than just like in different spheres? And is that something you'd like to see?
I want to start the long way around.
Please. We've got time.
Okay. To the best of my knowledge, the Progressive Caucus and the meetings among the Progressive Caucus are doing well.
Interesting.
I think they meet once a week. And in those meetings, discussions are cool.
Interesting.
They agreed on ideology. And so I understand the disproportionate attention on the internal moves. I understand that. But to the best of my knowledge, Progressive Caucus meetings, sharp.
It's a key point, actually.
You know what I mean? And I think it's important we know that because people don't often speak about that. I think Brian Molefe did mention it in his episode.
Yeah.
And I've asked about that several times as well. Are the Progressive Caucus meetings productive? Are they still going well? Is everybody on the same page? They're like, sharp, everything's fine. We're good. I was like, okay, that's fine. The next thing I want to bring up is that the march about the bellable. So did you see who was there?
I was gonna. We need a whole segment on this. Like,
and I just want to. Freedom Front Plus was there. AfriForum was there. DA was there. Patriotic Alliance was there. So basically, white monopoly capital pulled the string and everybody jumped, right? So Freedom Front Plus and DA and PA, they beef with each other and have the arguments all the time. But when push came to shove, there they were. Right.
Sure.
So what I'm trying to say is that if we want to have the internal bickering among like the socialist or leftist advocating parties, we can do that. It's fine. But if when push comes to shove and we can rip that cord and we can still move for the things we want to move for, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And so leading into 2026, I hope and I will be actively working toward in my capacity to push for that to be the case come 2026 elections. Are we shifting people's ideology to move toward those things that we want, like land expropriation, like nationalization? I'm always going to bring the conversation back to that because that's what people need. 55% of people living in poverty. We're always going to come back there. So I have faith that when the time comes and the cord is ripped, that everybody will jump on board. Because when the imperialist, West-friendly, neoliberal parties need to unite, they do, and they do so successfully, and they do so with like as quickly as necessary.
It's a really important point, and I'm just thinking now, like, if EFF and MK called some kind of action somewhere, that thing could be massive as well. Like when the time is right, like if something needs to happen and it's like, okay, there's going to be a march for land, or there's going to be a march for, greater economic inequality or whatever it is. Wow. That force is massive, actually.
We need to stop seeing that unity as optional. That's the end of that entire discussion. If we still keep seeing it as an optional or something that's tabled as like, do you know what I mean? Like, are we going to be united come 2026? Are we going to be on the same page come 2029? Well, apart from trying to gain votes, once we have those votes, are we going to be pushing for the same agenda? We can keep playing, but everything socioeconomically is still going to look the same. And that's one of the things that we need to, as the electorate and just as the public in general, need to understand and accept so that we can put pressure on our leaders as well. Hey, friends, stop playing. You know what I mean? Every day that we don't consolidate, people suffer. Not like leading up to 2026, not leading up to 2029, today. people are struggling because things like land expropriation has not happened, things like universal healthcare have not happened, things like free education from the beginning right through tertiary have not happened. People suffer daily because of those things. And I, in my capacity as head of research, as MKP, as somebody who makes social media content, as somebody who comments on these things, I'm going to always be putting pressure down internally and externally to be like, listen, the longer we fuck around, the worse it is for people. And we need to stop seeing this as an option. So if we want to cry and we want to go on, it's fine. Just move, please.
Let's talk about this Bella protest, because it was profoundly unsettling on so many levels. And firstly, I want to talk about hypocrisy. I just want, like, we might need a whole hour just for this, right? Because anti-constitutionalism is the stick with which MK is always beaten, right? Because they have a critique of the Constitution. How anti-constitutional is it to have people clad in apartheid colors marching against like a very minimal program of progress in basic education? So that there's that. The boldness, it's the boldness for me of like the apartheid colors, the apartheid interests, not even feeling ashamed anymore. Like pretty much just all out defending minority supremacy in South Africa. And then this GNU thing, like then the DA is marching against itself, but it's like that is really the alternative in South Africa, right? Is that the Freedom Front plus the DA and those forces get more and more power and try to take us back to a place that we don't want to go to. And maybe we don't speak enough about how dangerous that is, because people are drinking all of this DA Kool-Aid. Like if you give these forces power, we will have generations to undo what has already been done.
The one thing I will credit the parties like the DA and the Freedom Front Plus with, even civil rights organizations like Euroforum, I refuse to call them AfriForum. So the one thing that I will credit groups like that with is that they will tell you exactly how they intend to screw you over. They will tell you. I have never had an issue with, or very seldom had an issue, trying to find information on these parties telling you how they want to make life worse for you. They will tell you they want to implement minimum wage. They will tell you they don't want universal healthcare, whatever the case is. There was this clip that went viral where one of the MPs from Freedom Front Plus said that if you are going to implement land expropriation without compensation, there will be a civil war. Now, for an MP to be able to say that in Parliament with his chest, no repercussions thereof, and not get charged with the term of anti-constitutionalism, just speaks to the double standard of the kind of neoliberal government that we have now. So I've said so little on the Bella Ball March and everything like that, because people needed to see how bad it is. People needed to see how bold and how brazen they are. They also needed to see how organized they were. And all discussions about apartheid was long ago, racism is not so bad, white monopoly capital is not a real thing. All those myths were dispelled in that march. Because the parties that were jumping on board came together, or they stayed quiet on it and didn't attend it, or didn't, didn't speak out against how they disagreed with that. Whatever the case is, people, the Minister of Education, silent on it. And this is a bill that falls under her department. So I think it was important that people needed to see exactly how bad it is. Because I remember on our last episode, we had, and I said, I'm concerned that it's going to be like the frog in the pot situation. Yeah. It's going to get hotter and hotter and hotter.
That water is getting mighty warm.
I feel like that march was like where they turned the temperature up a little bit too fast, so that there was like a little bit of a jump. And if we don't respond to that and understand what that meant, that's on us. But it was just a reminder, hey, 30 years later, they are still racist.
And media just like doesn't have the same energy for this kind of stuff, right? They use all these like euphemisms and they don't criticize it as strongly as they criticize others. And I'm happy, like media criticize MK with all the might you have, which you've been doing. Criticize EFF and call them neo-fascist and whatever. But then have the same energy when this kind of terrifying march happens. And then it's like, oh, well, the tone wasn't quite right. It's like, no. You can't have that energy for this and then like full energy for the other stuff. Because that's just like hypocritical nonsense.
The way the media didn't want to recognize your platform.
Oh, no, they don't see us.
The way they didn't want to recognize your platform as the first person to interview Floyd on this topic. I was like, you know what? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that so that you can show that as the media, you don't recognize platforms that were created and propped up by the public. Because your platform exists, my platform exists purely
Absolutely.
because people find value in it.
If people don't want to watch, they won't watch.
You cannot force yourself on anybody's screen.
Yeah.
You cannot, I don't know if you have the budget to put yourself in as many people's faces as possible.
I assure you.
Do you know what I mean?
We've never advertised SMWX anywhere.
And I am very grateful that the media is also showing how they, in many ways, want to discredit platforms that are created by the public and then also want to just push it to the side. It's fine. I like the amount of clarity that's being shown in 2024.
There's a lot of clarity, that's for sure. And let's talk about the governing coalition. You know, because we've had a bit of time to see how this thing is shaking out. When we last spoke, I think the so-called GNU had just come into being. What are your thoughts on how this government has achieved and what it's been doing since it's been in office?
What have they achieved? Most of the things that they've been bragging about have been things that have been in the pipeline from 2022 in some cases going forward, whether it's in agriculture or in home affairs or whatever the case is. I don't know what people are telling me that the GNU is doing good things. I've yet to see it. Apart from, Rand stabilization, apparently. I don't know what it's done for the average South African. I don't see it just yet. Maybe, to be fair, we won't see it in the first 100 days. Maybe 100 days is not a fair measurement of whether the GNU can be doing well or not. I'll even grant that. Let me be fair. But the way they jumped on that march, I can tell you they don't have any good intentions. That being said, even if we just use like one individual and their change in stance over the past 3 months, Fikile Mbalula went from the GNU is fine, we have these mechanisms to work out disputes, to if Helen Zille wants to leave, she must leave tonight. Okay.
Yeah.
I think the GNU is telling us how the GNU is doing.
Yeah.
ANC marching against ANC for unemployment.
Yeah.
DA, PA, Freedom Front, well, not Freedom Front, but DA and PA marching against the Ballot Bill that is now a bill within the GNU. I don't know what to say. They're telling us how it's going, and it doesn't seem like it's going well. But to their credit and to the socialist side of things, criticism, are we doing any better? And I can talk shit about the GNU all day. But on the left side of things, we need to get our shit together.
Yeah, that's true, because like the GNU has had a honeymoon, and I think they're still in some ways within a honeymoon. But that honeymoon period in mainstream media is going to come to an end at some point. And when that honeymoon ends, there has to be an alternative vision that's presented to South African society, which they can actually get on board with. And I don't think opposition parties have yet seized the momentum to present that alternative vision.
Yeah.
So quite frankly, FF Plus and company will keep doing whatever they want, because there's not enough pressure on them yet.
Right. There's not enough of that. There's not enough opposition. Well, there is opposition, but we need to really be a lot more targeted, a lot more focused, and a lot more consolidated. Because me and you both know we can talk about the GNU for days. They will give us content. What they do in a month will give us content for a whole season.
The best thing for me is every time Helen Zille is asked, is this a government of national unity? She's like, this is not a government of national unity. And anyway.
And that's perfectly fine. But it is a lot less of a fun conversation for us to look at the parties or advocate for the things we want and be like, hey, we know they're doing badly, but are we doing well?
That's true. And while you say this, you've actually got me thinking, like, when is the conversation within opposition circles actually going to shift to like policy and things that need to change? You know what I mean? It's all about internal stuff. It's also a lot about the government and the coalition and that it's not working. But alternative programs, alternative projects like marches, big campaigns towards certain alternative policy visions. That's where things need to go, right? And that's what I would like to see. I'd like to see like MK coming up, or EFF, or maybe everyone together, you know, just saying like, okay, free education is the thing, or, you know, NHI and the way it's being abandoned is the thing. We need to push for this, mobilize for this within society, because that's what's different. Or this austerity budget, like, we believe in a completely different fiscal path for South Africa, you know. And to be fair, things haven't got to that point. That's not where the conversation is right now.
I'm not a politician, right? And I say that for this reason. When you have a platform like mine or a platform like yours, people message you or me on a daily basis. My cousins got fired, no due process. They've been without money for the past 2 months. They're about to lose their house. I've experienced racism in the workplace. This is what happens. I've been discriminated against. I've been sexually assaulted by my boss. He's in this little cabal clique. There's nothing I can do about it, right? I am so intimately and intricately linked to the public and the issues on a regular basis through this little joke that people, because people like joke about your TikTok account or your Instagram account and whatever, but they don't understand how much people reach out to give you information and to try and get help from you, or to solicit help. The reason I'm saying this is because I can't now, in the role that I'm in, isolate myself from the day-to-day experiences there. So when you say things like, I would like to see MK and EFF or the Progressive Caucus doing X, Y, and Z, those are the kind of things that I am trying to advocate for within the party, because I'm bombarded with them, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm smashed with all those kind of things every single day. And so the party is either going to love that about me, or they're going to hate that about me, right? Or the entire Progressive Caucus is either going to really appreciate that there's somebody saying, we're not really doing shit, or they're going to be like, hey, he's right, we're not really doing shit. Not to say that MPs don't have this understanding, because they engage with their constituents on a regular basis, and they also have this understanding. But pressure for that needs to come from everywhere, so that the day-to-day life of somebody else actually changes. And so we have to get that down. And so the reason I'm saying I'm not a politician, and I don't mean that in the sense that I'm saying these are the kind of people who are in the Progressive Caucus. I'm saying that in this traditional understanding of a politician, you get your salary, you're isolated from society, you just need to get your check and to go, and whatever the case is. I'm not that, and I'm not in that role. And so I'm always under pressure and incentivized to advocate for what are we doing that is going to make a difference in somebody's life on a daily basis. I can't just do my job and then go home and be like, that was a nice day, it was some successful work. It doesn't work like that.
Do you have any thoughts on what those things are, or what the priorities should be, like the policy priorities? Obviously, we now know the manifesto, the constitution, but then there are questions about like which things you put first. You know, what do you think are, or what is maybe the one thing that we need to be talking about right now that we're not talking about from this is what would be different under a new or a different government?
Our Reserve Bank. I think we, and many people will agree with me across the on the socialist side of things, we need to be able to control what happens with our currency, how much of it we print, and then also on the treasury side, how we generate tax revenue. It was one of the things we put in our statement with regards to the MTBPS about the wealth tax. So I think we need to, as a state, as a sovereign state, control the flow of money, and then also control how that gets distributed. And I think the way we have to sometimes fight with the Reserve Bank, We can do a lot of things. You know what I mean? I could say things like allocate more budget to healthcare. I could say things like allocate more budget to education and feeding schemes, etc. But at some point, if we can't control, like as a state, how much currency we want to issue and then tax back, and we can't control the ways in which we tax that currency back, we're going to struggle. We're going to fall short. And I think this is the problem that NPOs experience, because they will exist indefinitely, which is that then it becomes a systemic issue. If an NPO, the problem that they are trying to tackle means that they are in existence in perpetuity, you have a systemic issue. And you can't then, the NPO shouldn't exist indefinitely. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be there and they shouldn't do work. I'm saying that if you are targeting something like food and you are just constantly trying to meet this need in terms of feeding people, obviously there's a systemic issue. And that is ultimately going to come down to the flow of money, where it comes from, how it's distributed, and who controls that. And right now as a country, I don't feel like that's controlled here.
So let me put on my hat now as a member of the media who's not part of any party, right? Okay. And put some of the questions to you that people will have, because there are a lot of people who are thinking about MK, but they're not sure. And I think that's a fair place to be as well, or EFF or ANC or whatever. President Zuma has his legacy is looked at from two very different perspectives. There are people who absolutely love what he's done. There are people who absolutely love him and his personal touch, his popular appeal. Mm-hmm. But there are those who think he sold the state out, and that corruption was at its highest point under his leadership. What do you say to those people who say that President Zuma wasn't able to deliver when he had the chance?
I will be the first person to admit that I fell for the anti-Zuma propaganda. I've said it before. I've said it to the leadership in the meetings as well. I was like, listen, I fell for it. I did. And so I think people, not just for this particular party, but for all political parties, need to go on their own journey of trying to be educated on what actually happened. Because now that we understand the media is not going to feed it to you truthfully or timelessly, maybe they'll even tell you the truth like much later when it does very little for you. But I think people need to go on their own journey of discovery of political parties. But I think more importantly, and this is the idea behind the entire series I made pre-elections, people need to understand what their own ideologies are first, and then see how the party lines up. But with regards to his legacy, here's what I think. I think that whatever people think of President Zuma, let's assume all the negative things are true and all the positive things are true. Right now, there is a party that represents 15% of the electorate, along with another party that represents 9% of the electorate, etc. But together, those two parties unapologetically, just without flinching, want things like expropriation without compensation, nationalization, free healthcare, free education, etc., all those things. And it is up to us as the public to decide how you want to swing the bat we've been given. And so how you feel about him is an entirely separate conversation from the fact that with him and the team and the party, they've managed to say he's 15% of the electorate with the 9% of the electorate. And they are unashamedly asking for anti-imperialism, anti-colonialism, etc. And that's for us to decide what we want to do with.
Fam, you asked for some SMWX merch and we have delivered. I know you're always looking for ways to help support and grow this channel. So why don't you buy yourself an SMWX hoodie? Super comfy, super warm, and you can represent SMWX. You can check the link down below for how to buy your SMWX hoodie and help build and grow this channel so we can bring you more interviews, more analysis, and more educational insights. Now let's get back to it. And in terms of the internal workings of the party, there's a view that it's too formulated around the power of President Zuma, and there isn't enough space for internal dissent, debate, democracy, and his view is the final view. Yeah.
I've not seen that. I think that in many regards, from what I've gauged, he knows what he wants to do and knows how he wants to do it. But the people who are in those roles, there's lots of flex and change and movement around how they want to implement that. So I've not experienced that. And I've come in at like a decent level to be able to engage with various people in the party. And there's been like, and I don't think I'm like the easiest person to work with either, because I push back quite often when I think things can be done better and I think things can be done differently. And every time it's been well received. And
the final worry is the internal stability of the party, because we've seen lots and lots of SGs, MPs came in, they were ejected, new ones came in. Do you think that MK is going to be able to find itself internally and go forward as a united force, or there is a danger that these internal ructions can undermine the party and collapse it actually?
I think the party is going to need to go through what it needs to go through to eventually stabilize. It's less than a year old, and 15% is a big number. 15% is a big number to just...
At the first try.
And so even me, I've given... because sometimes you can find yourself frustrated with wanting things to be a certain way, and you're like, wait, I have to create it. You have to create that structure. You have to create that stability. And so I would rather be part of a party who will cut something or change something when they see it's necessary, than a party that's going to try and hang on and hold on to something for the sake of this perceived stability. Like if you see there's an issue and you listen, you'll change it. It's the one thing we appreciate about small businesses, because they can be so flexible in their formative years. So I would rather have the party just and change things than to be like, we just change somebody, or rather leave them here, etc. Like, no, make the moves if you need to make the moves if it brings you close to that point of stability where we're like, okay, now we can start moving. I would prefer that.
Darren Camphor, we could go on all day.
But I don't even know how long it's been. Always lose track of time.
But thank you for joining us, and thank you for honoring this platform with sharing the news. And
appreciate it.
Wish you all the best in this new and important role of yours, and hope that you're able to see some of your goals come to fruition.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me again. Always happy to be here.
You're going to come on every week. We'll definitely have you on again, maybe to check how things have gone, and
for sure.
Maybe early in the new year.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
Thank you for watching. Like, share, comment down below. This is where the news is made these days, and we look forward to hearing your views. Help us get to 200,000 subscribers, and keep it locked on SMWX. Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX, and I'm so glad today to be joined by a groundbreaking musician, but also a groundbreaking South African, Danny K. Thanks so much for coming on to SMWX.
The honor is all mine. Thank you.
I just want to get straight into it.
Yeah.
Because, you've broken important ground in speaking about race in South Africa as a prominent musician. And I just want to know, everyone kind of knows what happened, but how do you feel about the way that controversy, I don't know how it became a controversy, first of all, because it was like the most obvious statement.
Yeah.
That you made about just being white in South Africa and acknowledging white privilege.
Yes.
Now that the cacophony has died down, how do you feel about how that all played out and what it says about where we are right now?
I thought it was so sort of asinine, and when I tweeted it out, I went to sleep that night.
Yeah.
Didn't think much of it. Was like I'd been doing a lot of reflection with my partner, Kabelo Mabelane, about our history, my place in our country's very difficult history, and it was really there was a lot of reflection going on in my life, and I was sitting alone in my study and I tweeted this out, just saying, my ownership of my own privilege, given our past. Yeah, went to sleep, woke up, opened Twitter, #1 trending. I was like, what in the world is going on here? Started getting calls from the media, like it just exploded.
Wow, so you slept as this thing caught fire.
I kind of slept as it caught fire and woke up to this absolute eruption. And, I was always a very kind of PC artist. Never had much controversy over my career. Have always been kind of like, the guy who towed the line, looked after his brand. So anything of this level of controversy and people spewing hate at me was very new to me. And at first I was quite shocked by it, and it took me a while to digest it and figure out what my next move was. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, this was meant to happen. Everything that I'd been reflecting on, this was a statement that I felt I needed to own. There was certainly no backing down from owning it. And I thought now my responsibility is to kind of educate and explain what that little character tweet said. And I think that's sort of the problem with Twitter, is that you don't hear tone, you can't hear explanation, so people misinterpreted or maybe interpreted it quite right, but whichever side of the argument you were on. But then I went into the media and I wanted to really explain my definition of privilege and explain why it doesn't trigger me in a way that it triggers so many other white people, that when they're told, you have white privilege, it just makes them feel very uncomfortable.
So I want to talk a little bit about that reaction. Obviously we had Helen Zilla's wonderful reaction, which completely missed the point. And then just the way that the media framed it for me was quite troubling, because it became this like debate, and I'm like, why do we keep having these debates between people who are saying things which are true and people who are saying things which are crazy, and then equating those two positions? So, I mean, I saw something where you were put on some panel with, quite frankly, someone who I think is foolish, Chris Chameleon, on this issue. And then your positions kind of become equated, and it's like maybe this and maybe that, instead of us having the real conversation about privilege, white privilege, and various forms of privilege in South Africa.
Well, I mean, that was the thing. I was very, that's actually what disturbed me the most, was that the headlines were Danny K suffers backlash from tweet, and what was concerning to me was a shell-shocking or other white people from standing up and making statements like this, because it was like, God, look what happened to him. I don't want to say anything about this. And that to me was the concerning thing, because I think ownership of privilege, be it male privilege, heterosexual privilege, white privilege, is a very personal, self-reflective process that if you prepared to do that and own it and believe in it, there's nothing wrong with it. It's about finding humanity, empathy, all these things it did for me. And it worried me that tremendously. And when I would go on these panels, I would be like, why is this controversial? And why does this affect, people that see ownership of privilege in such a profound way? But look, that was my cross to bear. And I'm hoping that by doing interviews like this and by continuing work in the space, it gives the conversation some context. And it's like, for me, and Sizwe, I tell you, I was a guy who worked across the color line in the music business, and the privilege argument was even lost on me. I never really understood it until Kabelo and I began our keynote and our work in diversity, inclusion, racism, and we really thought about all of this stuff like very hard. And when you don't think about it and you just hear these buzzwords, you don't get it, and I understand why people don't get it, because there's a lot you need to look into, there's a lot you need to read, and if you're just hearing people in your echo chamber on Twitter saying there's no such thing as privilege, like what about the corruption in government, and what about black privilege, and look what they've done, and you start getting this whole conversation very muddled and muddy, and you need to segment it, and I think that's kind of the work that I want to do, is just to give it some context and explanation.
I think one of the things you say that really hits home with me, and something that I hadn't realized before, is it can be quite a lonely place as a white South African speaking out against racism. You know, as a black South African, you're like, well, this is tough anyway. But it's like, if you're a white South African, either your representative is AfriForum, who the media is like always giving a platform.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that although there are many white South Africans who are committed to this country and who understand the historical imbalances and how they come into the present, there are very few people who are allowed or given the space to have that conversation. And so the view of white South Africans in the media becomes dominated by extreme positions.
Yeah, and then you get accused of virtue signaling and, you know, all these sorts of things if you try to stand up as a white South African and own some of it. So, you know, you get cast with that on you. There was a time after these tweets where, I don't know if it was self-conscious, I don't know, but I would walk into rooms and it was very, very topical. And, I felt kind of, other white South Africans looking at me almost with, eyes of being a traitor, like it was uncomfortable and awkward for me. And look, I think when, your place in history gets judged, I'm happy I'm standing, where I'm standing. I think any responsible white South African has got nothing to apologize for if they say, our past was what it was. We've got work to do here in bringing about change and understanding and forgiveness. And, it's just the way I was raised. It runs in my blood. I can't help it. It certainly, and as I say, when I got accused of virtue signaling, I always used to laugh at it because I said, it was highly difficult for me to say these things or problematic if I was so concerned with my brand and preserving my brand.
Sure.
So it certainly didn't do me a lot of favors if I was, so concerned about my image and just being the guy who wasn't involved in any controversy.
Sure.
So, that virtue signaling came at a price for me.
Sure. Well,
and again, I'm not apologizing for it at all. Yeah.
Well, I think some of your critics were vice signaling, in my view.
Exactly, and tremendously revealing. I think that's what I was saying. Like, if you disagree with me, and Helen Ziller went out after me, I was like, well, let those tweets exist forever, and they will.
There's quite an archive there.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's leave it at that. I think one of the things you say that's interesting as well is, it feels like in this era of art in South Africa, there isn't as much direct political speech. There's a lot of pressure to kind of toe the line, to preserve your brand. I was at the Summers interviewing artists, and I was like trying to get something out of them.
It'll be tough. It will be tough.
It's so difficult, and and I think the reason why you should be commended, and we have this like weird culture where we don't commend anyone on Twitter, you know what I mean? Everything is essentially criticizable and we constantly criticize, is that, as you say, it's not fashionable anymore to come out with a political stance. It can cost you.
Yeah.
It can have financial costs.
Sure.
But we need artists in South Africa to actually start using their platforms. I mean, the scale of our problems is not any less, So just take us through like the kind of pressures that are on people in the public eye, especially musicians, to mute their opinions.
Yeah, it's there. I think, look, I came from a time in the music business where it was very sort of kumbaya, during when Madiba was released, and there was like having a voice. There was no real issues. We were all just like smoking the peace pipe together. And then I think as things have started to become real in South Africa, I think it's our responsibility as people of profile to have an opinion.
Sure.
And I think, if you truly care, the financial, compromise that you might have to take on your career is going to test your mettle, because it's going to say, how strongly do you really believe? And I think those artists or those people, I even look at Ringo, and Ringo's taken a very brave position, in my opinion, by standing with the EFF.
Sure.
And, credit to him. You might not like what the EFF says, you might love it, but you got to give him, his props for being brave enough to stand out there.
True.
And I think that the sincerity is if you see artists out there doing it, it's going to be sincere. And look, Madiba, I was lucky enough in 46664 and the Nelson Mandela Foundation, to see Madiba's like kind of ethic around really being brave in uncomfortable times. And he was my hero and still is. And I just feel this sense of, I don't know, responsibility. You know, like when Kabelo and I began this program that we're doing now, we didn't need to do it, but we sat together and we were like, there's just so much hurt. There's just so much confusion. And we are not as smart as you. I spoke about your mom, as smart as your mom in the space. And there's so many people that have done so much work in bringing us together. But we knew that if we made a little bit of a dent, we at least needed to participate in the space. And that's what runs through us.
When I was preparing for this conversation, and just to kind of change the conversation a little bit, I was actually thinking to myself, you've literally been famous for like nearly 20 years or something.
It has
right?
been, yeah. It's been a long time.
Yeah. And I just wanted to know, like, do you think fame is not all it's cracked up to be? Having been in the public eye for so long, how do you see fame, and how do you see whether it's a good or a bad thing?
So, when I began, I fell into all the trappings of fame, ego, selfish pursuit. And I think if you look at like the trajectory of people that become famous, that's often how it happens. Foolish, stupid stuff. And then eventually you stay in it long enough to pull yourself towards yourself. And if you're lucky, you realize that sooner than later. So I think Danny K in year 1, 2, and 3 was probably a big prick, and maybe not as grounded as he is today.
And how old were you in the first years of fame?
Like 23, 24, like around there in my early 20s. I'd been to university. I went to Wits Business School. I actually had a commercial career before I became famous. I worked at Investec Bank. And then I decided to throw in the towel and become a musician. So I went from this corporate kid to like this famous musician, and I was like, yes, I'd finally done it. And I went like kind of balls to the wall. And then I think I like sobered and started realizing that you're going to burn out very, very quickly if you don't separate the stage guy from the offstage guy. And I think I've just been doing this so long that I don't live in the music video anymore. Like I see some artists, that are always in the music video. They rock up on a Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the music video, and that's okay. I'm not, you need to go through that, and then I think you realize. And where I am now is, I think I want to harness the power of all of those years and this profile to just maximize things, So anything that I can do to use my brand, my personality, my space to try and do good things, that's what I see as the real benefit of fame, the accessibility, the platform. And that's the power that fame can give you, But conversely, it can also put you in a very, very big pedestal to fall very, very, very far down,
So let's talk about some of those things that you've been doing. You've had Shout. You've also now embarked on this new project with Kabelo, which is about, trying to raise consciousness around diversity. Let's talk about some of your work trying to leverage your public position for social change.
Yeah, so Shout is probably the obvious one that after Lucky Dube was murdered, again, Kabelo is a very like-minded person to me, in a sense that he's very driven and very, very focused. And, when you're starting businesses or when you're starting partnerships, you need an ally that is like a kindred spirit. And I knew to get the music industry together, it was going to...
Oh, man, that's like herding cats. Bro.
Yeah, exactly. It was going to be hard. And he had influence in one sector of the in one genre. I had another. And we started Shout as a response. We didn't really know what we were going to achieve, but we wanted to get everyone together. It was around crime and violence, which was, still is very, very topical, but back then there was no busasa or anything. So these were some of our biggest issues, were crime and violence, right? And it became very, very successful. And the funny thing is that Shout, about 2 years before that, I'm talking about the selfish, famous Danny K, who was there, had a meet and greet with Madiba at 46664 in Fan Court.
Right.
And it was one of my first meetings with him. And he put this challenge to me. I just had like a sit down with him. I've still got the picture. And I'd prepared a whole list of questions I wanted to ask him. I really was caught totally off guard. And he said to me, I challenge you to actually do something for someone other than yourself. He could almost see it in me that I was doing absolutely zero. And when Lucky died, it like haunted me. I thought, okay, here's my shot. Here's my chance. And with Kabelo, we started Shout 12 years later. We've done 3 songs. We've won SAMAs for the biggest download of the year with it. We've built 12 libraries across the country in primary schools to try and educate kids, really with the view that crime and violence is only going to change if people have are given options. And a lot of these kids, it's a long-term game, to educate rather than I guess fight crime with guns and bullets now. So education's our vehicle. And I mean, it's just been a wonderful, it's been a wonderful program to set up. I can't believe it's still running 10 years later. Next week we open our 13th library in Durban. So, small things can lead to big things. I guess that was my lesson.
And did the success of that lead you on to thinking in this new venture with Kabelo that there are avenues to do even different things, to focus on other social
so
issues?
I mean, we're very close. We speak to each other all day. We kind of look at our country, and every week, what are some of the things that are happening? What can we do? And it was around the time where there was Adam Katsavelos, Vicky Momberg, all of these things were starting to happen. These big racist, like flare-ups.
But I thought racism doesn't exist anymore. That's
exactly. And there's explicit racism, but there's also a lot of tacit racism that we also speak about. That when you're in safe spaces, words like they and these things that also I don't think have any place in our country. So Kabelo and I were watching this, and we were going, look, like we answered the call with Shout, we wanted to make a contribution. We just wanted to start a dialogue and a conversation. And I was doing corporate keynotes about my life and my struggles anyway, and I said to Kabelo, I was like, we need to get in these rooms. I'm in these corporates. These are like these are the trenches of our country where there's a lot of disharmony. People are working together, but they're not understanding one another. They're not getting to know one another. Let's start speaking to corporate South Africa and just getting the dialogue going through a prism of our own lives.
Sure.
So here's 2 different guys, one born in Diepkloof, the other one born in Sydenham in Glen Hazel.
Right.
One Jewish, one Christian, one Kwaito artist, one pop artist. Yet we've been able to be successful in understanding one another in spite of all this difference. And it's been no mean feat. We've had issues between us, Kabelo, racial issues, cultural misunderstandings. We've, over the past 12 years, had to really have patience and empathy and these things. So we wanted to use our own lives as a backdrop to say, here are our best practices. We've met with some of the greatest minds in the space in the country, and we really came with humility, saying we don't understand this, teach us. Because it's a difficult space, and it's hot potatoes everywhere. And now, after a year of research, we finally launched this program called Worlds Apart or Partners. So that's our thinking. We either worlds apart or we're coming together. And partnership is what we were about. It's what we've always done very successfully. And we just want to try and get people to be the best partners they can be. And that's essentially what the keynote, the masterclass, is about. It empowers people. And it's simple stuff, eh?
Sure.
It's simple stuff. This isn't like highbrow concepts.
Sure.
This is about I mean, I'll give you one example. Learning to pronounce one another's names correctly and not having to change, if you're a black South African, your name because it's not going to be understood or pronounced properly, because like we identified that, names are your identity. And if you change it from Sizwe to Sydney, that's not you. It's not what your parents named you. Again, we speak about Madiba, that he was Holy Hlatla, but he became Nelson, because of just that problem. So, like I say, we give people simple tricks of just conscientizing their humanity and saying, let's think of each other as people, like that.
Would you ever think of going to Parliament? Because you mentioned Ringo, and I'm like, making a lot more sense than a lot of the politicians.
The truth is, I can't find a party that I really think would be a good fit for me, which I think a lot of South Africans are struggling with. So I love some of the stuff the EFF says. I really do.
That would be quite something.
I love some of the stuff the ANC says. I like some of the stuff the DA says. But then I hate some of the stuff they all say, which I think in this last election, and I followed you, and I followed a lot of political commentators that I was looking for advice, because I walked into the ballot booth and I was like, what do I do? And so many of us, I think, were locked in that conundrum of who do we vote for? And I guess that is the challenge of politics South Africa, is to kind of find, to find the best solution out there for guys like me. And I don't know what you have to say about that. I mean, I think you should go into politics, by the way. But, I mean, would you?
Should we start a party now? I mean, hey.
The purple car guys did it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. If
maybe we can start the yellow car. I don't know.
Cool, man. I'm down.
But, look, I think civil society and the private sector is always where I thought I could make the biggest dent. So when we raise money for our libraries, we don't go to the Department of Education. We want to tap into corporate South Africa, because there's enough demand that exists there, and enough or a little resource that needs to go a long way there. And we didn't want to burden government or the purses of government with building libraries. We wanted to go to Old Mutual, Steers, these sorts of guys that are in the private sector, and we've been successful there. So I've always been a private sector guy, and I think getting into politics is a whole nother animal that I just frankly don't understand. I don't.
Well, it's been great to chat. You never know what can happen in the future.
Listen, if you start a party, I'll consider I'll consider being your. I'll write you the theme song.
Yes, cool. Coming soon. Thanks so much for joining us on SMWX.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks for having me.